History remembers powerful rulers, yet few figures capture the imagination like Queen Elizabeth I of England. She was more than just a monarch, she became a legend, a symbol of strength in a world dominated by men. Her story is a tale of danger, love, betrayal, and incredible resilience. Elizabeth ruled for over 4 decades, the Elizabethan Age. It was an era of great exploration, artistic genius, and rising national pride. She defied every expectation. She was a woman of sharp intellect. She had to navigate religious conflict, foreign threats, and plots against her own life. Elizabeth was handed a nation deeply divided. Her journey to one of England's greatest rulers is a testament to her determination to protect her people and her crown. She carefully crafted her public persona, presenting herself as a queen, married only to her kingdom. Her story makes her one of the most fascinating figures in history. Her legacy is in the very spirit of the nation she helped to create. To truly appreciate Elizabeth's achievements, we must first understand the chaotic world she was born into. The England of the mid-16th century was a deeply troubled land, torn apart by religious strife and political instability. Her father, the formidable King Henry VIII, had shattered 1,000 years of tradition by breaking with the Roman Catholic Church. He did this not for grand theological reasons, but for a very personal one. He desperately wanted a male heir, and the Pope would not grant him a divorce. This single act plunged the nation into a religious firestorm, creating a deep and bitter divide between Catholics and the newly formed Protestant Church of England. This was the fractured kingdom Elizabeth would one day inherit. The turmoil did not end with Henry VIII. After his death, the crown passed to his young son, Edward VI, a devout Protestant who pushed the country further away from its Catholic roots. Churches were stripped of their icons, and ancient rituals were outlawed, angering a large part of the population. But Edward's reign was short-lived. Upon his death, his half-sister Mary took the throne. Determined to reverse her father's and brother's changes, Mary I began a brutal campaign to restore Catholicism to England. She earned the grim nickname Bloody Mary for her persecution of Protestants, burning hundreds at the stake for their faith. The country swung violently from one religious extreme to the other, leaving ordinary people confused, frightened, and deeply divided. This was the England of Elizabeth's youth, a nation at war with itself. The constant religious upheaval created an atmosphere of suspicion and fear. Neighbors spied on neighbors, and speaking the wrong prayer could lead to imprisonment or even death. The kingdom was also weak on the international stage. It had lost its last territory in France and was seen as a pawn in the great power games of Spain and France. The royal treasury was empty, the military was weak, and the people were losing faith in the monarchy. The future of England looked incredibly bleak, with many fearing civil war or foreign invasion. It was into this cauldron of instability and danger that Elizabeth was thrust. As the daughter of Anne Boleyn, her very legitimacy was questioned. She was a living symbol of the break with Rome which made her a target. She had to learn to be cautious, to hide her true thoughts, and to navigate a court filled with spies and enemies. The volatile, dangerous, and divided England of her youth was the ultimate training ground, shaping her into the shrewd and pragmatic ruler she would need to become to survive and succeed. Among all the titles and descriptions given to Elizabeth I, one stands out above all others: the Virgin Queen. This was not just a simple statement about her personal life, it was a powerful political identity that she cultivated with immense skill throughout her long reign. In an era when royal marriages were the primary tools of diplomacy and alliance building, Elizabeth's decision to remain unmarried was radical and unprecedented. For decades, the question of who the Queen would marry was the most pressing issue in European politics. Suitors from every major royal house in Europe vied for her hand, seeing a union with England's Queen as the ultimate prize. The pressure on her to marry was immense, coming from all sides. Her own advisors in the Privy Council constantly begged her to choose a husband. They argued that a king was needed to help her rule and, more importantly, to father an heir to secure the Tudor line. Without a clear successor, they feared England would descend back into the chaos and civil war that had plagued it before her father's time. Foreign powers saw her unmarried status as a weakness to be exploited, while at home plots swirled around her Catholic cousin Mary, Queen of Scots, who many saw as the rightful heir. Yet, despite all this pressure, Elizabeth resisted, turning the marriage question into her greatest diplomatic weapon. By keeping her potential suitors guessing, she masterfully played them off against each other. She could dangle the possibility of marriage to Spain to keep France in check, and then hint at a French alliance to worry the Spanish. This diplomatic dance kept her enemies off balance and prevented any single power from becoming too dominant. But her image as the Virgin Queen was also for her own people. She presented herself as a monarch, married solely to her kingdom and her subjects. In a famous speech she declared, "I have already joined myself in marriage to a husband, namely the Kingdom of England." This transformed what many saw as a weakness into a symbol of selfless devotion. This carefully constructed identity became central to the cult of personality that grew around her. Poets and playwrights celebrated her as a new goddess, a chaste and divine figure who had sacrificed personal happiness for the good of her nation. This powerful propaganda helped to unify the country behind her, turning her into an object of veneration and national pride. The name the Virgin Queen was therefore far more than a description of her marital status. It was a statement of power, a tool of statecraft, and the cornerstone of a legend that defined an entire age and secured her place as one of history's most iconic and successful rulers. Elizabeth's life began with disappointment. Born September 7, 1533, to King Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn, she was not the desired son. The king's joy turned to dismay. Elizabeth's arrival was seen as a failure, her position precarious. Her legitimacy was questioned, and this shadow of illegitimacy threatened her status. Despite this, Henry gave her a grand christening and household. Elizabeth spent her early years in lavish residences, surrounded by tutors. Her early life was a mix of royal privilege and uncertainty. This taught her crucial lessons in survival. This turbulent beginning defined a life of struggle for survival and acceptance. Elizabeth was not yet 3 when her world was shattered. Her mother, Anne Boleyn, had failed to produce a son. To clear the way for a new marriage, Henry needed to get rid of Anne. In May 1536, Anne Boleyn was arrested on trumped-up charges and imprisoned in the Tower of London. Anne was found guilty and sentenced to death. She was led to a scaffold on Tower Green and beheaded. In an instant, Elizabeth's life was irrevocably changed. She was no longer a princess and declared illegitimate. She had lost her mother and her status in one devastating blow, a trauma that would shape her character. This early experience of abandonment taught her a harsh lesson about the fickle nature of power and loyalty. She learned that survival depended on one's own wits and caution. This forced her to develop an inner resilience far beyond her years. Henry would go on to marry 4 more times, creating a childhood environment of constant instability. After Edward VI's death, Elizabeth's life was in grave danger under her Catholic half-sister, Mary I. Mary saw Elizabeth as a heretic and a threat, forcing her to outwardly conform to Catholicism while being watched by hostile courtiers. Every action was scrutinized. A single misstep could mean death. Elizabeth mastered the art of survival, hiding her true beliefs, giving ambiguous answers, and learning to read her enemies. This crucible forged her political skills, preparing her for the throne. In 1554, the Wyatt Rebellion erupted, and Elizabeth was accused of conspiracy. She was imprisoned in the Tower of London, facing relentless interrogation and the threat of execution. Despite fear, Elizabeth maintained her innocence with careful, precise answers, never incriminating herself. With no evidence found, she was released to house arrest, but the ordeal left her forever changed. This near-death experience hardened her resolve and political instincts. Elizabeth emerged a survivor, ready for the challenges ahead. On November 17, 1558, Mary I died, and Elizabeth became Queen of England. The nation erupted in celebration, desperate for change after years of turmoil. Elizabeth's public debut as queen was a masterclass in winning hearts. She greeted crowds, accepted flowers, and projected confidence. Her symbolic entry into the Tower, now as queen, marked her triumph over adversity. Elizabeth's journey from prisoner to monarch inspired hope for a new era. She now faced the monumental task of uniting and ruling a fractured kingdom. Elizabeth inherited a bankrupt, divided, and vulnerable England. Religious tensions threatened civil war, and foreign powers eyed the throne, supporting her Catholic rival Mary, Queen of Scots. As a young, unmarried woman, Elizabeth faced immense prejudice and pressure to marry. She had to prove her strength and legitimacy in a world dominated by men. The odds were against her, but she was determined to succeed. Elizabeth's first crucial move was appointing loyal, capable advisors. Chief among them was William Cecil, a pragmatic, trusted administrator who became her principal secretary. Their partnership, built on mutual respect, anchored her government for decades. Elizabeth balanced her council with both Catholics and Protestants, ensuring unity and diverse perspectives. This wise selection of advisors stabilized her reign and laid the foundation for England's future success. Elizabeth's most urgent task was to solve the religious crisis that was tearing England apart. The country had been violently swung from her father's break with Rome to her sister's severe Catholicism. Elizabeth knew she could not simply pick one side. She needed a solution that both Protestant and Catholic could accept. She sought a compromise, a middle way that could unite the fractured kingdom under her rule. In 1559, she pushed her solution through Parliament. It became known as the Elizabethan Religious Settlement, and it was a masterpiece of political compromise. The first was the Act of Supremacy, which re-established the break with Rome. The second part was the Act of Uniformity, which established what the new Church of England would look like. It was a church that was Protestant in its core beliefs, but looked somewhat Catholic in its rituals. For the vast majority of the English population, it was a welcome relief from the religious extremism and violence of the previous reigns. This pragmatic and tolerant approach successfully cooled religious tensions and brought a fragile but essential peace to her kingdom. From the moment she ascended the throne, who Queen Elizabeth would marry became a crucial issue in European diplomacy. It was a high-stakes game, and Elizabeth was the ultimate prize. For decades, her hand was sought by foreign princes and kings. Each proposal was not romance, but politics. A marriage could shift the balance of power, create alliances, and plunge enemies into conflict. Her Privy Council pressured her to marry and produce an heir. The list of suitors was long and impressive. First among them was King Philip II of Spain. He saw marriage to Elizabeth as a way to keep England Catholic and maintain the alliance that had existed during his marriage to her sister Mary. Then there were the French princes, the sons of Catherine de' Medici. A French match was a tempting way to counter Spanish power. Other contenders included Eric XIV of Sweden and Archduke Charles of Austria. Elizabeth proved to be a master of the diplomatic game. She never gave a definitive yes or no to any of her suitors. Instead, she used the marriage negotiations as her primary foreign policy tool. She would hint at accepting the Spanish offer to keep the French on their best behavior. Then she would enter negotiations with a French prince to make the Spanish nervous. This kept all of Europe guessing and, more importantly, kept England safe. By dangling the prospect of marriage, she prevented any single foreign power from becoming openly hostile, as they all hoped to one day win her hand and her kingdom. This frustrated her counselors. They saw her refusal to commit as a dangerous gamble. But for Elizabeth, it was a calculated strategy of survival. She had seen how her sister Mary's marriage to Philip of Spain had caused rebellion. She was reluctant to subject herself or her kingdom to a foreign master. The marriage game was a delicate balancing act, one that allowed her to maintain England's independence. Foreign princes vied for Elizabeth's hand, but Robert Dudley held a unique place in her affections. Their closeness sparked scandalous rumors. Many nobles considered Dudley unsuitable. Rumors damaged the Queen's reputation. The situation exploded when Dudley's wife, Amy Robsart, died suspiciously. The scandal made a marriage between Elizabeth and Dudley politically impossible. Elizabeth chose her kingdom over her heart. The Dudley affair taught her that her personal life and public role were linked. She decided her kingdom was the only safe match. Elizabeth was not just a shrewd political operator. She was also a gifted orator and writer. In an age before mass media, her words were one of her most potent weapons. She understood the power of language to inspire, to persuade, and to command loyalty. Throughout her reign, she delivered powerful speeches at key moments, using them to shape public opinion and define her relationship with her people. These were not just dry policy announcements, they were masterful performances of political theater, carefully crafted to project strength, devotion, and even maternal love for her kingdom. Her speeches became legendary, rallying the nation behind her and solidifying her status as a beloved monarch. One of her earliest speeches was delivered to Parliament in 1559 in response to their request that she marry. Parliament was quite insistent, arguing it was her sacred duty to provide an heir. Elizabeth's response was a masterclass in diplomacy and rhetoric. She thanked them for their concern, but firmly asserted her own authority. It was here she first introduced her symbolic marriage to England, famously declaring, "And in the end, this shall be for me sufficient, that a marble stone shall declare that a queen, having reigned such a time, lived and died a virgin." This statement stunned the court and laid the groundwork for her public persona. Later in her reign, as threats from Catholic plots in Spain grew, her speeches took on a more defiant and martial tone. Her most famous example was at Tilbury in 1588, as the Spanish Armada prepared to invade. She appeared before her soldiers dressed in a silver breastplate over white velvet, a true warrior queen ready for battle. Her words that day have echoed through history. "I know I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king, and of a king of England too." This challenged patriarchal views of her time, a powerful assertion of her right to lead. These speeches weren't just about projecting strength, they created bonds of love and trust with her subjects. She referred to her people as her children, and herself as their mother, fostering a sense of national family with her at its head. She blended monarchical authority with the language of affection, a combination that proved incredibly effective. Through her carefully chosen words, delivered with conviction, Elizabeth did more than just govern. She actively forged a new sense of English national identity centered around loyalty to the crown and shared pride in their remarkable queen. Her words built a legacy as enduring as any monument. As Elizabeth rejected suitor after suitor, what began as a political strategy transformed into a powerful national myth. The Queen's unmarried status became a virtue. Elizabeth and her government cultivated this image, turning her virginity into a symbol of dedication to England. She was married to her kingdom, and all Englishmen were her children. This was the birth of the Virgin Queen cult, promoted through every available medium. Playwrights, artists, and musicians all contributed to this growing cult of personality. Portraits depicted her with symbols of virginity and purity. The cult of the Virgin Queen stepped into the spiritual vacuum left by the break with the Catholic Church, unifying the nation and sanctifying her rule. By remaining unmarried, she kept power in her own hands, transforming this controversial position into a source of immense strength. This carefully constructed identity was her masterpiece, securing her throne and capturing the imagination of her people. For decades, Elizabeth's England and Philip II's Spain were ideological opposites in a tense Cold War. England was the leading Protestant power. Spain was the champion of Catholicism, funded by wealth from the New World. Philip saw it as his duty to crush Protestantism. Elizabeth supported rebels in the Netherlands and authorized raids on Spanish treasure ships. The situation escalated in 1587 with the execution of Mary, Queen of Scots. Philip launched a full-scale invasion of England. He assembled the largest naval fleet ever seen, the Invincible Armada. The Armada, with over 130 ships, aimed to meet Spain's army in the Netherlands, cross the Channel, and march on London. Their goal, to depose Elizabeth and extinguish Protestantism. England faced an existential threat. England prepared its defenses. England's smaller, faster ships, led by sailors like Drake, prepared for battle. As the summer of 1588 approached, England waited. In late May 1588, the Spanish Armada set sail from Lisbon, a vast fleet blessed by the Pope. The fleet faced immediate problems. Commanded by the Duke of Medina Sidonia, who had little naval experience, bad weather forced the fleet back to port, delaying the invasion. By late July, the Armada was sighted off Cornwall. Signal beacons blazed across England. The English fleet, led by Lord Howard, met the enemy. Smaller, faster English ships with superior cannons engaged the Spanish. A running battle ensued up the English Channel. The English were running low on ammunition. The Armada reached Calais, awaiting Parma's army. This was England's darkest hour. A critical flaw became apparent. No deep water port existed to safely embark Parma's troops. The armada was exposed off Calais. The English commanders knew this was their last chance. On July 28th, under darkness, the English executed their desperate plan. They sent 8 burning ships drifting into the anchored Spanish fleet. The Spanish captains cut their anchor cables and sailed out into the open sea in disarray. At dawn, at the Battle of Gravelines, the English fleet attacked. The superior maneuverability and long-range gunnery of the English vessels proved decisive. Several Spanish ships were sunk or badly damaged. The battle, combined with a strong wind, had pushed the Spanish ships northwards. Medina Sidonia sailed north around Scotland and Ireland. Hurricane-force gales wrecked dozens of Spanish ships. Fewer than half managed to limp back home. It secured England's independence and announced England's arrival as a major naval power. The defeat of the Spanish Armada unleashed national pride across England. The victory created a sense that England was special. This ushered in England's golden age. It was an era of unprecedented cultural and artistic achievement, fueled by national optimism. This was brilliantly expressed in the theatre. At the forefront was William Shakespeare, whose plays captured the Elizabethan world. The era saw achievements in music, poetry, and exploration. The victory at sea emboldened English sailors and explorers, laying the groundwork for the future British Empire. It was a nation ready to make its mark on the world. Elizabeth's leadership was key to this golden age. It was the catalyst for a cultural rebirth that defined an age. The victory over the Spanish Armada marked a high point, but the following years were not always easy. The war with Spain dragged on, straining finances. Poor harvests, economic depression, and rising poverty tarnished the golden age. As Elizabeth aged, she became increasingly isolated. Conflict in Ireland further drained the treasury. In 1601, she delivered her golden speech, reaffirming her love for her people. As her health failed, the succession became unavoidable. Robert Cecil corresponded with James VI of Scotland, the most acceptable candidate. Elizabeth died at Richmond Palace in 1603, at 69, after ruling for 44 years. The Tudor dynasty ended, met with national grief for their Gloriana. The Elizabethan age had ended, but her legacy was just beginning. The legacy of Elizabeth I is immense and multifaceted. She was more than just a successful monarch. She became an enduring symbol of England itself. Her most immediate achievement was bringing stability and unity to a nation that had been on its knees. She inherited a bankrupt kingdom, torn apart by religious hatred and threatened by powerful foreign enemies. Through her shrewd leadership, political skill, and masterful compromises, she healed the deep divisions and forged a new sense of national identity. Her religious settlement, though not perfect, brought an end to the violent religious persecutions and laid the foundations for a more tolerant English church. Her reign fundamentally changed England's place in the world. When she came to the throne, England was a second-rate power, a pawn in the games of France and Spain. By the time she died, it was a major naval force, confident and ready to build a global empire. The defeat of the Spanish Armada was the turning point, a victory that shattered Spanish invincibility and announced England's arrival on the world stage. This new confidence fueled an age of exploration and cultural brilliance. The works of Shakespeare, the adventures of Drake, and the flourishing of art and music were all made possible by the peace and stability that Elizabeth's long reign provided. Perhaps her most revolutionary legacy was proving that a woman could rule as effectively, and in her case more effectively, than any king. In a world completely dominated by men, where female rulers were seen as unnatural and weak, Elizabeth demonstrated that leadership was about intelligence, courage, and character, not gender. She used her status as a woman to her advantage, creating the powerful myth of the Virgin Queen, a ruler married only to her nation. This carefully crafted image allowed her to maintain absolute authority, command loyalty, and become an object of veneration. She provided a powerful new model for female leadership that would inspire generations to come. Ultimately, Elizabeth's story is a timeless tale of survival and triumph against impossible odds. She was the unwanted daughter of an executed queen, declared illegitimate, and imprisoned on suspicion of treason. She faced down plots, rebellions, and the mightiest empire on earth. Yet through it all, she not only survived, but she thrived, guiding her people through perilous times and into a golden age. She left behind a secure, prosperous, and confident England and transformed the monarchy into a symbol of national pride. Queen Elizabeth I was not just a great queen. She was a true architect of the English nation, a legendary figure whose reign continues to fascinate and inspire us to this day.